The storm came from nowhere, a wall of white and thunder that swallowed the small human starship as it broke through the clouds of an unknown frozen moon. Commander Ethan Cross tried to steady the controls, alarms flashing red across his visor, his heart hammering like a drum inside the metal coffin. The ship shook violently. One of the engines exploded in a burst of blue flame, and gravity spun him sideways. Ethan shouted a curse and slammed the emergency landing thrusters. But the controls were dead. He had seconds. Only seconds before the ship hit the ground. Through the front glass, he could see endless snowfields, mountains rising like sharp teeth, and then nothing but white as the ship slammed into the ice with a deafening crash. Silence followed, deep and endless. Ethan opened his eyes slowly. Everything hurt. Blood ran down his forehead. The cockpit was filled with smoke and frozen air. He coughed and unbuckled himself, his hands shaking from the cold. The temperature warning blinked red -60 degrees and dropping. He grabbed his oxygen mask and forced the emergency hatch open. The metallic hiss of air filled his ears. Outside, the storm screamed, snow blew sideways, and the sky above was a swirl of blue lightning. He stumbled out of the wreck, his boots sinking into the snow, the light from the ship fading behind him. He looked around for signs of life, a signal, anything. But there was only ice, endless ice, and the sound of wind like voices whispering his name. The comms were dead, the heater was gone, and the night was coming fast. He knew he had maybe an hour before the cold killed him. He returned to the wreck to find some supplies, kicking open a panel to grab a thermal blanket, a flare gun, and the last bit of emergency rations. As he turned to close the hatch again, he froze. There was movement outside the cracked viewport, something crawling toward the ship on hands and knees. At first he thought it was his eyes playing tricks, a mirage caused by the cold. But then he saw her, a figure in the snow, small and trembling, with faint blue light coming from her skin. Her body was nearly bare, covered only by thin metallic cloth torn in places. Her hair long and silver white, tangled with frost. Ethan's first thought was impossible. She was alive, but not human. He ran outside again, the cold slicing into his lungs like knives, and reached her before she fell face first into the snow. He turned her over gently, her eyes half open, glowing faintly with a color he had never seen before. She tried to speak, her lips blue, but only a weak sound came out, a whisper carried by the wind. Please, warmth. Ethan didn't think, he acted. He lifted her in his arms, shocked at how light she was, almost weightless, and carried her back into the ship. Her skin was like ice, her pulse barely there. He sealed the hatch and wrapped her in the thermal blanket, but even that wasn't enough. The cold was inside her, deep and killing. He activated the last emergency heater, but it flickered and died within seconds. There was only one option left, the old survival method every pilot was trained for. He hesitated, looking down at her still face, then cursed under his breath and pulled her close to share his body heat. For minutes nothing happened. He could feel his own warmth draining. But then slowly her breathing changed. A faint glow spread across her skin, and her fingers gripped his arm. She pressed closer without opening her eyes, her head resting against his chest. Her heart beat fast, strange and uneven. Ethan's mind screamed at him to stay awake, but exhaustion and cold dragged him down. As his eyelids grew heavy, he heard her whisper again, softer this time, "Don't leave me again. Human." His eyes snapped open, confusion cutting through the haze. Again? He had never met her before. He wanted to ask her what she meant, but his voice wouldn't come. Darkness pressed in around him, his heartbeat slowing as he drifted into sleep. The only sound was the wind outside and the slow rhythm of her breathing beside him. Two lives trapped together on a dead world. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Ethan didn't know. But when he opened his eyes again, the first light of the frozen dawn spilled through the cracked viewport. The storm had quieted, a silence now thick and calm. He looked down and saw her still there, her face peaceful, the glow from her skin softer now. She looked fragile, yet there was something powerful about her, something otherworldly. Ethan reached for the console, trying to send a signal, but the transmitter sparked and died. He cursed again and leaned back, watching the mist of his breath fade in the cold air. They were stranded, alone on a frozen moon that wasn't even on his star maps. No rescue, no signal, no hope. Only him and a mysterious alien girl who had appeared out of nowhere. He didn't know who she was, how she got here, or what she meant by those strange words. But one thing was certain: if they were going to survive, they would have to trust each other, even if neither of them understood the other's world. Outside, the wind began to rise again, howling across the ice fields and deep beneath the snow. Something mechanical stirred, blinking red lights and moving metal. Unaware, the two lost souls had just changed the destiny of an entire planet. The story of the human pilot and the alien girl had only just begun. The wind outside howled like a living thing, shaking the half-broken ship buried in snow. Ethan Cross sat awake in the dim red glow of the emergency light. The alien girl lying beside him under the thin thermal sheet, her breathing was shallow, uneven. Her skin still cold to the touch, though a faint blue shimmer pulsed along her arms like moving light under glass. He could feel his own body shaking, exhaustion fighting against the bitter cold. He checked the cracked control screen again. The power core was dead, oxygen low, and no contact with command. He was a ghost on a frozen moon with no name. The alien girl stirred, whispering something in a language the translator couldn't process. Her eyes flickered open silver with faint golden rings, and she looked at him as if trying to remember his face. Ethan spoke softly. "You're safe now. You're in my ship." She didn't seem to understand, only pressed closer to him. Trembling, her voice was a fragile echo. "Warmth. Please." He sighed, pulled the blanket tighter around them both, and let her body rest against his chest. Her skin was strange cold at first, but gradually it began to warm as her inner glow returned. Time slowed, the storm outside fading into a low hum. Ethan watched frost melting from the ceiling panels, small drops of water falling onto her hair. She looked peaceful now, almost human in sleep, except for the faint patterns glowing across her shoulders. He noticed scars too, long and deep, like burns. Someone had hurt her before. She wasn't just lost, she had escaped something. Ethan brushed a lock of silver hair from her face, feeling guilt for even touching her. He was supposed to be a soldier, not a savior. Hours passed in silence. He tried to rest, but every time he closed his eyes, he saw flashes of fire, wreckage, the memory of the crash, and now her face. There was a question he couldn't shake. What did she mean by again? Had humans been here before? Or was she remembering someone else who looked like him? He didn't know, but the thought unsettled him. The translator chip in his ear blinked green connection, re-established for a moment. He tapped it. Static, and faint words came through. Signal received. Retrieval in process. But before he could reply, the signal cut. The alien woke suddenly, gasping for air. Her hand gripped his wrist hard, her strength surprising, her eyes wide with fear. No signal. Turn it off. They will come. Ethan frowned. Who? My people? She shook her head violently. Not your people. Rathbone? The word felt heavy in his ears. The translator interpreted it as conquerors. He had heard rumors in the war briefings, an ancient species who wiped out colonies and erased evidence they ever existed. But they were myth, weren't they? Her voice trembled. They hunt survivors. They burn the cold worlds clean. Ethan quickly checked the console. The emergency beacon still blinking faint red light through the cracked hull window. He cursed. She was right. The automatic distress signal was active, broadcasting their location. He reached up and smashed the control with his fist. Sparks flying, the alien girl sighed weakly, her body relaxing as if she had been holding her breath for hours. "Thank you." "Human." Ethan looked at her carefully. "What's your name?" She hesitated, as if searching for the memory. "Lyra," she said softly. "I am Lyra of Nerelia, or what is left of it." Her eyes clouded as she looked toward the frozen horizon beyond the glass. "Your ship fell where my people died." Ethan followed her gaze, seeing shapes half buried in ice metal. Bones, towers long forgotten. The whole valley was a graveyard. He felt a chill run deeper than the cold. "You were here when it happened?" Lyra nodded slowly. "Long ago. I slept under the ice to survive the firestorm. And then I woke to you." Ethan didn't know what to say. He wasn't a scientist or diplomat, just a soldier on the wrong planet. But he understood one thing clearly. They were both stranded in the same nightmare. Outside, lightning flashed across the snowfields, illuminating dark shapes in the distance, moving, large, mechanical. The scanner on the console flickered back to life for a second, detecting heat signatures, 3 of them closing fast. Ethan's gut tightened. He knew what that meant. Not rescue. Not help something else. Something hunting. He looked at Lyra, who was already sitting up despite her injuries. "They found the beacon," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You should leave me. Human, they will come for me, not for you." Ethan grabbed his blaster and shook his head. "I don't leave people behind." Her silver eyes softened, and for a brief second she smiled, tired, sad, but grateful. The storm outside began to rise again, the first hum of engines echoing across the frozen plains. Lyra's glow brightened faintly, energy pulsing beneath her skin. "If we stay here, they will burn this place," she said. "We must move before sunrise." Ethan nodded, sealing his jacket and slinging his pack. He looked one last time at the wrecked cockpit, the last piece of home he would ever see, and then at the alien girl who had saved his life by needing his warmth. Together, they stepped out into the blizzard, their figures vanishing into the storm as the sky above flickered with red light from descending ships. The ice cracked beneath their feet, the moon itself groaning like it knew war was returning. Ethan didn't look back. He had no idea where they were going, only that leaving together was better than dying alone. The human and the alien girl disappeared into the endless white, and behind them, under the ruins of the ship, the shattered beacon blinked one last time before going dark. But far above, in the black of space, something had already heard it. And it was coming. The wind had softened, but the cold still cut through like a knife. Ethan and Lyra moved across the frozen plains, their footprints fading behind them almost instantly. The stars above were distant and cold, reflecting off the ice like broken glass. Every sound seemed sharper here, the crunch of snow, the faint hum of Lyra's bylight, the quiet hiss of Ethan's damaged breathing mask. They had been walking for hours, heading toward the shadow of the distant mountains. Hoping to find shelter before sunrise, Ethan checked the radar on his wrist console. The signal showed movement again, 3 heat sources, triangular formation. Getting closer, he frowned, his voice low. "They're tracking us," Lyra nodded, her expression unreadable. "Wrathborn hunters use drones. They scan for life energy. They do not stop until it ends." Ethan clenched his jaw. "So we keep moving," but he could already feel the exhaustion sinking deep into his bones. They reached a valley of ice ridges, pale blue light glowing faintly from cracks in the frozen ground. Lyra stopped and placed her hand on one of the glowing fissures. Her voice turned softer, almost sad. "This is where my people built their power cores. The warmth you feel beneath the ice is what kept us alive. Until they came." Ethan crouched beside her, studying the faint light pulsing under the surface. "Can we use it?" he asked. "Can it power my comms? Maybe boost a signal?" Lyra shook her head. "No, human, it is not for machines. It is for life itself." Before Ethan could ask more, the air above them filled with a distant hum metal wings slicing through the sky. He grabbed Lyra's arm and pulled her into the shadow of a broken ridge. Through the cracks of the ice, he could see them now, 3 black ships hovering low, scanning beams of red light sweeping across the snow. The Rathburn had arrived. Lyra's body stiffened, her glow dimming instinctively. She whispered, "They smell heat, even in the dark." "Stay still." Ethan's hand went to his blaster, his finger hovering near the trigger. One of the ships passed so close he could see the symbols painted on its hull sharp, angular marks glowing crimson. He held his breath as the beam swept across their hiding place. The light passed, then moved on. The ships continued deeper into the valley. Hunting something or someone, Ethan exhaled slowly. That was too close, but Lyra shook her head. "They will circle back," she said. "They always do." Ethan looked around, trying to think fast. The ice ridge behind them seemed hollow, a narrow tunnel leading down into the blue light. "In there," he said, pulling her with him. They squeezed through the crack and slid down a frozen slope into a glowing cavern beneath the surface. The air here was different, warmer. Shimmering with energy, the walls glowed with soft, flowing lines like veins of light, and strange crystal formations rose from the floor like frozen trees. Lyra's eyes filled with tears. "This was a sanctuary," she whispered. "My mother brought me here when the fire came. I thought it was gone." Ethan looked around, all mixing with sorrow. "It's beautiful," he said quietly. "It's like the planet's heart, but beauty didn't last long." A loud rumble echoed above, followed by a sharp metallic roar. The Rathbone ships were drilling into the ice, sending down probe drones. Ethan checked his blaster, half charge left. "Not enough to fight an army. We need to block the tunnel," he said. Lyra nodded and knelt beside one of the glowing crystals. Pressing her hands to it, her entire body began to glow brighter. Streams of light flowing from her palms into the crystal. The ground trembled as the ice shifted, closing the entrance above them, sealing them inside. Ethan stared in disbelief. "You just moved the ice." Lyra's breathing was shaky, sweat freezing on her forehead. "Not moved," she said softly. "Spoke to it. Neuralian energy is alive. It listens when we ask." Ethan helped her stand. "You saved us," he said. "For now," she whispered, looking up. "But they will not stop." They rested for a while in the faint warmth of the cavern. Ethan tore a ration bar in half and handed it to her. She looked at it curiously, sniffed it, then smiled faintly before taking a tiny bite. "Sweet," she murmured. "Human food is strange but kind," Ethan chuckled. "That's the nicest thing anyone said about it." Their brief peace was broken by a deep, vibrating sound like thunder beneath the ice. Ethan looked up, the walls trembling. "What is that?" he asked. Lyra's expression turned to fear. "They found the ancient core," she said. "If they awaken it, the whole valley will burn again." Ethan stood quickly. "Then we stop them." Lyra looked at him, unsure. "You would fight the Rathburn for me?" He met her eyes. "Not for you, because no one deserves to die like this." Her expression softened, and for the first time since they met, she reached out and took his hand. "Then we fight together," she said quietly. The glow from the cavern brightened around them, reflecting in their eyes. Above, The ice cracked open as the Wrathborn drills reached the surface, and Ethan raised his blaster, while Lyra's hands lit up with waves of pure energy. The battle for survival was no longer about warmth or shelter. It was now about defiance. A human pilot and an alien girl standing against a darkness that had destroyed worlds. And as the first beam of red light broke through the ceiling, Ethan whispered under his breath, "Let's show them humans don't freeze easy." The ceiling above exploded in a burst of red light and falling ice. The Wrathborn drills tore through the frozen surface like claws, sending chunks of glowing crystal crashing around Ethan and Lara. He pulled her behind a pillar of blue ice as energy beams scorched the ground. The sound was deafening, a mixture of roaring engines, cracking ice, and alien metal grinding through stone. Lyra's glowing hands trembled. "They found us," she whispered. Ethan aimed his blaster upward, his voice steady even as fear gripped him. "Then let's make them regret it." The first Wrathborn drone dropped through the hole, a black machine with spider-like limbs and a single red eye. It scanned the cavern and immediately locked onto their heat signatures. Ethan fired, the blue bolt slicing through the air and striking the drone's core. It exploded in a flash of sparks, but more followed, crawling down the tunnel walls like metal insects. Lyra stepped forward, her body flaring with light. "Stay behind me," she said. The veins beneath her skin glowed white-hot as she raised her hands, and the air itself seemed to shimmer. A wave of energy burst from her palms, hitting the advancing drones and freezing them mid-air. They cracked like glass and shattered into thousands of glowing shards. Ethan stared in disbelief. "You did that?" He breathed. Lyra winced, clutching her chest. "It drains me," she said, "but I can still fight." He nodded, checking his blaster's last cell. "We'll make it count." Above them, the Wrathborn ships repositioned, their engines rumbling as they opened fire, beams of crimson plasma ripping through the ice layers. The cavern shook violently, cracks spreading across the floor. Ethan dragged Lyra behind a fallen crystal, yelling over the noise, "We can't stay here, it'll collapse." Lyra's eyes darted toward the center of the cave, where a glowing structure pulsed beneath the ice. "The ancient core," she said. "If I link to it, I can stop them, but it could kill me." Ethan's answer came fast. "Then we find another way." Lyra shook her head. "There is no other way, human. The core feeds the storms that protect this world. If I wake it, it will fight them." Ethan grabbed her arm. "You'll burn yourself alive." She looked up at him with that same quiet sadness from the night before. "You shared your warmth with me when I was dying. Let me return it now, for a heartbeat." Neither of them spoke, the world frozen around them. And then Ethan nodded. "Then we do it together." They ran toward the core as the ceiling split open completely, revealing the storm above, red lightning twisting across the clouds. Lyra knelt beside the glowing fissure and pressed both hands into the ice. Ethan covered her from behind, shooting down another drone as her energy began to merge with the core's light. The whole cavern came alive, waves of color rippling through the walls. The Wrathborn ships above faltered as their systems flickered. The energy field Lyra created spread outward like a living storm. The nearest ship fired one desperate plasma cannon. The beam hit the ground near Ethan, throwing him backward into a wall. His ears rang, his vision blurred. Through the haze, he saw Lyra still kneeling, her body now almost translucent, glowing like a star about to break. "Lyra!" he shouted, crawling toward her. She looked back at him, her smile weak but peaceful. "Go, Ethan. It's enough." He shook his head, pulling himself to her side. "Not without you." The ground erupted beneath them, a surge of blinding light shooting upward into the storm. The Wrathborn ships shattered instantly. Torn apart by raw energy, the shockwave raced across the valley, melting ice and erasing everything in its path. Ethan threw his arms around Lyra, shielding her as best he could, but the light consumed everything. Then silence when Ethan opened his eyes. The world was white, not from snow but from steam. The storm had broken, sunlight filtering through cracks in the clouds for the first time in centuries. The air was warm, almost gentle. He looked down to find Lyra lying motionless in his arms. Her skin no longer glowing, only pale and cold again. "No, no. Stay with me," he whispered, shaking her lightly. Her head fell against his chest. Her breathing so faint he could barely feel it. He looked around desperately, spotting his broken survival kit, half buried nearby. He pulled the last thermal blanket over her and held her close. "You're not dying here," he muttered. "Not after saving us both." But her voice came out like a dream. "The world lives again." "That is enough." Ethan shook his head, refusing to let the silence take her. He picked her up and began to walk across the steaming snow, the melted ice turning into shallow pools of glowing water. Behind them, the destroyed ships sank into the soft earth, their red light fading forever. He didn't know where he was going, just away from the wreckage, toward the faint line of mountains that promised shelter. As he stumbled forward, her hand twitched, weakly gripping his sleeve, her voice barely a whisper. "You still warm?" Ethan smiled faintly through the tears on his frozen face. "Always will be," he said. The storm clouds finally broke apart completely, sunlight pouring down over them, and for the first time since the crash, the ice world looked alive. But above the quiet sky, beyond the thin atmosphere, a single Wrathborn signal pulsed faintly in orbit, carrying a message across the stars, a record of defeat and a warning to others. Humanity and Norelia had survived, and that was something the galaxy would soon remember. The sun rose slowly over the broken horizon, its golden light spilling across the thawing plains of the once frozen moon. Steam curled from the ground, mixing with the glow of melted ice, turning the landscape into a misty sea of light. Ethan Cross opened his eyes to the warmth on his face. The silence was heavy, but peaceful. The wind was no longer a scream, it was a whisper, soft and distant. He turned his head and saw Lyra lying beside him. Her pale hair spread like silver over the wet snow, her skin no longer cold, faintly glowing again, like the first spark of a candle after long darkness. He reached out and brushed her cheek gently. "Hey, you still with me?" he murmured. Her eyes fluttered open, the golden rings within them glowing weakly. "Still here." "Human," she whispered. Her voice was faint but calm. Ethan let out a shaky laugh of relief. "You scared me." She smiled, her lips trembling. "I scare you, but you stayed." He nodded. "Yeah. Guess I'm stubborn like that." He helped her sit up slowly. The air around them was warm enough to melt their frozen clothes, drops of water glimmering on her skin like tiny diamonds. For the first time since the crash, he could breathe deeply without pain. The oxygen levels had risen. The sky above was clear blue, with streaks of light where the Wrathborn ships had exploded. Lyra looked up in awe. "It hasn't been this bright in 1,000 years," she whispered. Ethan followed her gaze. "Looks like you woke up the whole planet." She shook her head softly. "No, we did." They sat together in silence for a moment, the warmth between them almost unreal after so much cold. Then a sharp tone came from Ethan's wrist communicator. He flinched, pulling it up, his heart racing. The screen flickered, showing the emblem of the human fleet command. "Signal lock acquired," the voice said. "Rescue craft inbound 30 minutes." For a moment, he couldn't speak. He looked at Lyra, who watched the display with wide eyes, fear replacing the peace in her expression. "Your people," she said quietly. "They will not let me live." Ethan frowned. "What?" "No, they'll help you. They'll take us both home. But Lyra shook her head. I've seen what humans do to things they don't understand. They'll put me in a lab, cut me open, call it science. Her voice cracked. I would rather stay buried in the ice than be a prisoner again. Ethan stared at her. Torn between duty and something deeper, he had spent years following orders. Obeying rules, but none of those rules mattered now. Not after what they'd survived. He moved closer and placed his hand over hers. Then I won't let them touch you, he said, if they try. They'll have to go through me first. Lyra looked at him in disbelief. You would protect me. Against your own? Ethan smiled faintly. Guess I'm not very good at following rules. The rescue ship appeared as a shining dot on the horizon, growing larger as it descended. Kicking up waves of steam and dust, Ethan helped Lyra stand. Wrapping his jacket around her shoulders, the warmth between them wasn't just physical anymore. It was something stronger, forged in fire and frost. As the ship landed, human medics rushed out, scanning the area, shouting orders. Ethan raised his hand, calling them off. We're alive, he said firmly. She's with me. A commander stepped forward, eyes narrowing at the sight of Lyra. What the hell is that, Cross? Ethan's jaw tightened. She's a survivor from this world, the commander scoffed. You mean the alien who just set off a planet-wide energy surge? She's coming with us for containment. Lyra stepped back. Trembling, Ethan's hand went to his blaster. His voice cold. You'll have to shoot me first. The soldiers froze, the air thick with tension. After a long silence, the commander sighed. Lowering his weapon, Fine, Cross, she stays with you for now. But Command will want answers. Ethan nodded. They can have answers. Just not her blood. Lyra's eyes filled with tears. She looked up at him, whispering, You kept your promise. Ethan smiled softly. Told you I don't leave people behind. The two walked up the ramp together, the light of the rising sun behind them turning their silhouettes golden. As the ship lifted off, Lyra pressed her hand against the window, watching the world below shimmer with life once more. It's beautiful, she said. Ethan looked out beside her. It's home now, in orbit. Sensors recorded the strange energy patterns across the moon's surface, rivers of warmth flowing through what was once ice. The files would later label it the rebirth event. But for Ethan and Lyra, it would always mean something simpler, something human, a moment when warmth conquered the cold, and two strangers from different worlds saved each other just by staying close. As the stars stretched before them, Lyra rested her head on his shoulder, whispering the last words before sleep. You gave me life, human. Now let me give you light. And as the ship drifted into the golden edge of dawn, the once frozen moon glowed softly below, alive again. Because one human refused to let go, and one alien girl chose to trust warmth over fear. The universe, for a brief and quiet moment, felt human again.